Hello friends, I'm Dr. Chirag Trivedi. I'm the president of Indian Society for Clinical Research based in Mumbai. So clinical trials have always been the cornerstone of any drug that we develop. Any medicine that you and me or our families consume today have gone through the rigors of clinical trials. It's a way to test the drugs that we develop for safety and its efficacy. After it passes all the different phases of clinical trials, a drug is approved by the regulatory authorities basis the data that gets generated from these clinical trials, and then it is used by the practicing doctors to treat their patients. Clinical trials are really very important for us because there's a huge disease burden that we need to tackle, and it is important for us to develop drugs for different diseases to alleviate the sufferings of the patient. Now, clinical trials has evolved over a long time. If you see, they've been done since the 20th century. Randomized clinical trials. The first randomized clinical trial was done in the 17th century by a person called as James Lind. He did the clinical trial on the sailors for scurvy, which is vitamin C deficiency. So he tested certain sailors with vitamin C and the others did not get vitamin C and saw the difference. So it started right from the 17th century. And on 20th May he started doing this experiment. That's why 20th of May each year is celebrated as the International Clinical Trials Day. Now from there on, we've definitely moved a lot, and a lot of newer diseases, therapies that we see for these diseases have gone through the rigors of clinical trials. The way in which we conduct clinical trials, the way in which we plan clinical trials has undergone a significant evolution. Technology has now been brought in. Things are moving towards getting more from the digital platforms that we are using. People are using wearables, getting data from it. Clinical trials also are using wearables now. We are looking at conducting virtual trials. That means the patient sitting in his or her comfort of her home, they send the data there. So we get the data collected from those digital devices. So the global has moved a long way in terms of the clinical development cycle. Overall, it used to take earlier 12 to 15 years to develop one drug. Today, that drug development cycle has shortened to an average of around 10 years, 8 to 10 years or so it takes for one drug to come into the market. So there's rigorous testing that happens all over, and this is a huge amount of time and investment in terms of money that goes into making of one new drug. In clinical, so if you see the global research map today, there are a lot of public registries which are available. If you look at those registries globally, suppose close to 300,000 clinical studies are now currently registered on one of these websites which are available. Of that, approximately 40% of these clinical studies are registered in the US alone. Of the total number, close to 30% are registered in the European Union. So if you see here, in these developed nations, a lot of clinical studies are ongoing, and they help in generating data for the drugs or for the diseases that are being studied. So Indian clinical trials also started here. So in the 20th century itself, we did start doing some trials. In late 70s and 80s, we had certain companies which were doing some randomized control trials and all that. From 90s onwards, these number of trials increased here in India. So that kind of the globalization of clinical trials started happening in India. The global drug development, India was being a part of global drug development since probably late 80s and early 90s or so. The rules for clinical trials in India started way back in 1988 with the Schedule Y for the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. In 2005, the Schedule Y was amended to change it. Prior to 2005, as you all may be aware, clinical trials are done in different phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So prior to 2005 in India, there was a phase lag. What does it mean? That suppose we could not do parallel phase trials as what would be going on elsewhere in the world. If some country had done phase 2 study and then they progressed to phase 3 study, we could do only phase 2, and we could concurrently not participate in that phase 3 study which was going on somewhere else in the world. Now this was changed in 2005, wherein the parallel phase studies are allowed. That means if globally a phase 3 trial is ongoing, India would also participate concurrently in that phase 3 trial. This obviously was a positive move because you would get the drug earlier in India. Initially, because of a phase lag, there was a lag in the drug availability to the patients, but with this removal of the phase lag, the access of drugs to the patients became easier. So that way, it really helped a lot for our patients to get the technology, the better technology, better drugs for treating the diseases. From 2005 to 2010, we saw a good increase in the number of trials being done in India. So in 2010, we had close to 500 clinical trials that were registered with in our own registry, wherein the pharmaceutical companies were conducting these trials in India. It could be the multinational companies or it could be the Indian companies, but that really gave a good impetus to the results. But mind well, while we were doing 500 clinical trials in 2010, the percentage of our contribution to global clinical studies was only 2%. So at its peak also we were at only 2% of the global studies that were conducted. Majority of it, again as I said earlier, was done by the US and by the EU and other countries. So Indian Society for Clinical Research, ISCR, was formed in June 2005. Now this is a not-for-profit organization. It is consisting of all like-minded people of clinical research. The society came together to further the cause of good ethical clinical research so that we can alleviate the suffering of the patients. So this society consists of not only people from the pharmaceutical industry and the CRO industry, but also from the hospitals, doctors, ethics committees. Everybody is a part of it. Currently today we have 40 accredited member organizations, one of which is a hospital also, one of which is an academic center as well, and there are more than 600 individual life members from the industry, from the physician fraternity, from the ethics committees, etc. The society, in the last more than 13 years now, we've done a lot of capacity building in the country, help the hospitals, help ethics committees, help pharmaceutical sponsors and CROs in capacity building, in shaping the clinical research environment so that we all can do good quality clinical research in India. So we had a lot of challenges. If you see in the last 5 years, we had many challenges in India, and more so to do with the way in which the policies were framed. Now, in 2013, there were certain rules which came up early in 2013, Jan 2013. Some of these rules were very welcome. They helped, like the ethics committee registration, it helped to get a form and shape for the ethics committee, the standardization of the way in which the ethics committee function in terms of the structure, functioning, the processes for review, and also that really helped. So that was a very welcome change. But there were certain other clauses which were added, which were kind of against the basic tenets of clinical research, which did not go down well with the clinical research fraternity. Internationally as well, there was a lot of feedback that we got that no, this is not going to help clinical trials in India, and we could see that. In 2013, the number of clinical trials that we did that got approved in India was only 17, whereas in 2010 we were doing 500 global clinical trials. So obviously there's a significant dip. A lot of advocacy efforts went in from different corners. ISCR also played a very important, leading role in getting the advocacy, because we need to get the right messages to the right people. The policy makers, the regulators, the ethics committees, everybody came together and we said, okay, let's have rules which are more balanced. So from 2015 onwards, we could see the rules were getting balanced, and the rules definitely protect the rights, safety and well-being of the patients, and at the same time make it convenient for a clinical researcher to do ethical clinical research. So if you see that slowly from 2015 onwards, I mean 2013 there were 17 trials approved, 2014 close to 37 trials, then kind of 60 trials in 16. In 2017 we had close to 100 global clinical trials approved in India. So slowly and steadily things started coming back in India. In 2013, because of the new rules, international academic institutes like the NIH had said that we are not going to do trials in India, so they had withdrawn doing trials from India. And likewise, there were some other good academic institutes as well which did not do trials in India. But post these rules which got balanced from 2015 onwards, we saw these academic centers coming back as well, and there is a renewed number that we can see that slowly it is increasing global participation in India. So the challenges have gone behind now. The way forward is, see, India is, as we all know, is the second most populous nation in the world. We have a huge disease burden. Approximately 1/5 of the global disease burden lies in India. 2016 ICMR, the report which says that the type of diseases in India are changing now. Some decades ago, it was more of the infectious diseases were on the rise. Because of the lot of measures being put in by various agencies, including the government and all others, the infectious diseases are kind of declining now. The lifestyle related diseases, the non-communicable diseases are really increasing at an alarming rate, and that's where there's a huge unmet medical needs for Indian patients. So that is where we need to develop new drugs for our patients, because it's huge. I mean, and we need to definitely do something. So clinical research, clinical trials help us to search for newer therapies, newer treatments for our patients. So we are looking at more clinical trials to be done in India because we have this large disease burden. That's where I'm looking at. In our interaction with the government and the policymakers and all, we understand that they are coming out with a newer policy, and based on the discussion that we've had, we look forward to that policy being absolutely balanced, wherein protecting the patients as well as having good impetus for the researchers to research on areas where we have unmet medical needs. We definitely need a lot of awareness among different stakeholders, and it could be the the patients themselves, because the patients need to be aware. See, the ultimate beneficiary of clinical trial is the patient, and when the new drugs come in, they definitely get treated for those patients. So obviously, the patient is the ultimate, and patients therefore need to know. We've always had this misnomer of clinical trials being equated to something which is really very dreadful, and I want to appeal you all to spread the message that it is not dreadful. Clinical trials from centuries has been helping us to develop newer drugs, and that's where we need to have a more balanced view towards clinical trials in India, and all stakeholders, be it the government, the policymakers, the regulators, the industry, the physicians, the hospitals, all stakeholders need to come together to make sure that we do it. Now, ISCR has laid down a strategic roadmap in the immediate term, mid-term, and the short-term goals as well for us. What we are looking at is to continue our capacity building, because we definitely need that to strengthen capacity at various stakeholders, for be it hospitals, ethics committees, or sponsors, or contract research organizations. So that we'll do it. We will continue with our awareness advocacy as well, because as I said earlier, it needs to go further and awareness has to be increased from what its levels are today. We're looking at having an association with a lot of other associations like the Physician Association, the Industry Association, so that we all can work together to strengthen the framework. We'll continue interacting with the policymakers and the government and the regulators to make sure that we have a good policy framework for clinical trials to be conducted in India. We want to obviously promote drug development in India. We definitely want to see that Indians come forward in the global drug development map, and that's what our endeavor is going to be. So we're going to be helping with the Physician Association, with all the others also, to upskill on that and work towards it. One of the other things that we're also going to be looking as a long-term objective is to help in bringing the digital revolution for clinical trials in India as well. Things are moving to the digital space. So obviously, India also needs to move forward. India has a lot of capabilities, India has a lot of brains, India has a lot of talent here, and we want to utilize that talent, and we can convert things so that India leads the digital revolution for clinical trials as well, and that's what we are going to be looking at as a way forward.